Almost everyone wishes they could not be nervous for an audition. They wish they could just walk in without any worries and play their best as they know they can. But so very few people can actually accomplish this. And so, as someone who's got an audition coming up soon, and if you're watching this, you probably do too, I hope that one of these 5 things that we're going to go through can help you alleviate those nerves, even just a little bit, because that small bit of being less nervous might be the difference between you messing up that passage that you were sort of on the fence about, 50-50. Sometimes it goes right, sometimes it goes wrong. And so anything you can do to just reduce it a little bit could be the difference between you succeeding and failing that audition. So we're not going to waste any time. The first thing is to think long term. Now we're going to start with the sort of broader picture, sort of mindset things, if you will, because they really lay the foundations for how you approach the audition. Because as much as the audition is a naturally stressful environment to be in, most of the stress is in your head. And so we have to deal with these things first before we get to some of the later things are more specific about what you should actually do in your practice leading up, what you can do physically when you walk in to play the audition. But the first is to think long term. And this is really, really important because it reminds us of what we're actually doing, why we're doing the audition. The easiest way to explain this, I think, is that if you zoomed out and looked at your whole trajectory of playing, right, as you learn the instrument, it sort of goes up and up and up and up and up. And over a long enough time scale of your life, or over the years you're in a degree or studying, it looks linear, maybe exponential. Maybe there's a few bits where it goes higher and lower. But if you zoom in to this very, very small fragment of the audition, a fragment of time that is the audition, now it looks very different, right? You're not sort of improving the things that take you the best trajectory for the long term. You're just focusing on the smallest tiny details. And so when you have an audition, what happens is we get really, really bogged down in these details of, oh no, this one note wasn't in tune. This passage, I can't play this piece. There's a mistake here, this doesn't sound good, this doesn't sound good. And it takes us away from what we're really trying to do. Because the purpose of the audition is usually to get better education, or it is to get a job, right? A position in an orchestra, somewhere like that. And these two things, we do them so that we can get that larger improvement arc for the lives over years, right? We don't do that just for the audition, for the sake of the audition. And so to be able to walk into an audition thinking of things in the long term, rather than thinking of just the audition right now, being able to think of, okay, this is just a part of the entire career. And more than that, it's a part of the entire history of playing the instrument. If you think of all the people who've played the instrument, not just now in our lifetimes, but over the hundreds or thousands of years, everyone's taken an audition, right? Most all of those people have taken auditions. And so if you zoom out and think of the whole career, all those other people, all that history, all those people who have taken auditions, you suddenly go, okay, this is just another audition. This is nothing out of the ordinary. The people on the panel of the audition, whether it's a competition, whether it's university entrance, whether it's an orchestra, the people on that panel have taken many, many auditions. For them, it's just the next round of auditions, the next round of participants, right? This year's audition bracket. And so if you think of it like this, if you can bend your mind to sort of zoom out of what is happening in the audition, zoom out from what's happening right now, what you need to do, in the next month, the next week. If you can find a way to think of the long term, to think of this as just another audition, because it is just another audition. Another thing that goes along with this is if you really plan what's the worst case scenario. Because usually, worst case scenarios in our heads seem pretty frightening. We sort of go down a spiral of everything that could go wrong. And if you mess up the audition, then you wouldn't get in here, and then you would have no teacher, or you'd have no job, and then these people wouldn't be happy with you, and everyone would make fun of you, and then you'd have no other place to go to learn more or to audition for another job, and everything would go down, down, down. But in reality, most likely that's not the case. And most likely the case is more that, okay, you didn't get this audition. Maybe there's another one for something similar in a month or two. Maybe there's another person you could get lessons from. And there's always the next round of auditions next year. That's usually the worst case scenario, if you really think about it. And so if you think, really, what's the worst case scenario? What's the worst that could happen to me? It's usually not that bad. After you step it all out, it's usually not that bad. The next thing, and this is more on what you should actually practice now, what you actually do in your practice coming up to it, not just thinking about the audition. Two things that go together: compromises and priorities. So these are things that you have to factor into your practice. First, we have compromises. When you go into an audition, when you're prepared, you have a deadline to play, you have to be prepared to compromise. You have to be prepared to say, okay, maybe I can't learn that whole new piece in time for the audition. I have to play something else. Maybe that one movement or that one section, okay, I can't take it at the tempo I ideally want. Okay, maybe you slow down a bit. Or this section, I have to take some time here. It's too fast. I can't quite play it. Or, I want to use a different fingering or a different bowing, but I just can't quite get it in time for the audition. It's okay. You have to be prepared to make compromises, and you have to be prepared to let some things go wrong. Of course, there's a certain level you need to reach. You need to be okay with saying, I'm going to walk into this audition, and it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be pretty good. It's going to be as good as I can get it. But it's probably not going to be perfect. And that's going to be okay. I have a good story related to this from just the other week. I'm in Austria right now. We went across the border to Slovenia to see Maxim Vengerov play the Sibelius Concerto. And it was exciting. We take the journey. It's like 2-3 hours by the train. We get up in the morning, take the train down, spend the day in Ljubljana at the castle and whatnot. And we get to the concert of Maxim Vengerov. And then the orchestra comes on. They play their Wagner. I'm just kidding. But they played a whole Wagner overture first. And then Maxim Vengerov comes on. And it's crazy because, it's Maxim Vengerov. And to see Maxim Vengerov in the flesh, to see an actual person walk out in front of your eyes onto the stage, is crazy. That you're not just hearing the sound and you're not just thinking of, watching him on a screen, but he's actually there in real life. And so he begins to play the Sibelius Concerto. The opening, he plays most amazing sound you'd ever heard. Right? One of most amazing. Because we can all agree Maxim Vengerov is probably an idol for many of us in the violin world. He's probably one of the greatest violinists sort of in the height of his careers right now. And so he plays and he plays, and then he gets to the cadenza. Infamous jump, right? So there's a rest. There's those low notes, from the cellos, the basses. And then he plays the B flat. And he gets up to the top octave. Perfect. Glorious. Amazing, right? Then he comes down. He gets to the bottom. G. Plays the arpeggio. Plays the next arpeggio. Gets stuck. Something goes wrong. Something in there doesn't quite work. One of the notes he played earlier than the other note, or something was the wrong time, or he shifted the wrong position, or he tried to go one note too high. Either way, something goes wrong. just a little bit, but he recovers. And he gets back down to the arpeggio bottom. He goes back up again. Something messes up the second time. Whatever it is, something small, something like a missed note or a shift gone wrong, something wasn't quite right. And then he gets down from that arpeggio and he goes on. And it's fine, completely fine. And the moral of the story is that this is Maxim Vengerov playing a solo concert with a professional orchestra, making a mistake. If he's going to make mistakes, you have to be okay with making small mistakes, making these compromises in an audition. Because the audition is so far away from the natural sort of music making that we're trying to do that it feels very weird and very forced. And so you have to be okay understanding that some things are not going to be as ideal as you'd like them when you perform that audition. The next thing, the priorities that goes along with that, is that you have to take some compromises. You have to be able to say, okay, some things are maybe they're just not going to be perfect, or they're just not going to be as good as I wanted them, or as good as that, the 10 recordings I listened to, whatever. Then you have to take everything else and prioritize what you practice. You have to say the things that are worse need to be made better, and the things that are better, maybe they don't need to be touched on so much. Because what makes the most of a difference and what you get the best return on your practicing in is when you go from not being able to play something, when you go from that thing messing up really, really badly, that one part not going well, to getting through that fine. That's a much bigger return than going from the bit that you can play well, playing it a bit better. It's not that much of a difference. But from something that you think you are likely not going to make it through that passage when you come to the playthrough, to being like, okay, it's passable. That is a much bigger difference. And so in your practice, you should prioritize. This is why I'm always on about planning practice, because this is especially important. You can't go through your repertoire that you have to play and just expect to play it all through and then play it all through and it should be fine. You want to go through with a fine-tooth comb and look at the things that you need to prioritize, the things that are important, the things that are going to make most of a difference in the time that you have. Because you have a time limit, right? And so you have to put priorities onto certain parts of your playing to say, okay, this isn't good, this needs to be worked on, and then we need to work on this, and then we need to work on this. And then before you know it, things sort of start to shape up to a passable performance, right? And so that really helps alleviate a lot of the stress because you know what you're focusing on right now. It's not overwhelming where you deal with every problem and everything, and this has to be perfect, and this is no good, and this. Now you say, okay, compromise. Some things aren't going to be perfect. And then you say prioritize. We've got to fix what needs to be fixed. Simple ideas to work on your practice. The next is a strategy for basically when you walk in and you have to play the audition. One of the things that can help with the nerves the most is to think about things outside of your playing, which is really, it sounds counterintuitive. Don't you want to be thinking about your playing the most because you need to play well and all this. But what can throw people off a lot more than just the pressure of having to play, in front of people, is the fact that they have to play in a new environment. And it's the fact that they change very small, strange sorts of things about their playing. You may notice this if you've ever watched a video of you playing back when you hadn't recorded anything before. You notice things like you stand weirdly. And you go, why am I standing like that? Why am I holding the violin like that? If you normally hold the violin like this, and you walk into the audition and you hold it like this. Just something a little different. Or your feet position. You suddenly stood really with your feet close together or something. And you're breathing. You weren't breathing very well. Because you know that when you walk into the audition, probably you're going to be shaking, your bow's going to be shaking, and probably your hands are going to be sort of clammy, sweaty. But you do have the ability to walk onto the stage how you would walk normally. You can control how you walk and think about it walking normally. You can think about the setup of your instrument. You can think about, okay, I need to keep this angle open. Don't close in suddenly like this just because you play on stage. Think about where you look. If you normally always look at the violin and suddenly you walk in and you sort of, when you're playing, you're sort of glancing over to the people watching, or you're closing your eyes, or you're like, look at the roof, something will probably go wrong. And it probably won't go wrong just because you were nervous. It'll probably go wrong because you just did something different that you weren't prepared for. If you practiced how you did, and you went into the concert and you played the same way, but how you held the instrument was different, how you stood was different, how you breathed was different, where you looked was different, obviously you're going to play differently, right? There's going to be a different result. And so just keeping in mind a few of these things, a few of the big ones to keep in mind how you stand. And this is not you bring a tape measure to measure how wide your feet are apart. You try to feel the balance in your feet, where you're leaning. Are you leaning really far forward to try to, reach out the music, to try to play louder, more expressively all of a sudden? Because you weren't doing that in a practice room. Most of the time you should try to stay grounded, stay balanced, a little bit backwards even. That'll help a lot with the nerves. Then the next is to think of the angle of which you hold the instrument. You don't want to hold the instrument in a different way to when you normally practice. So make sure you have this open angle. Don't close in too much, like this. And you stay there, as you normally would. Same with your head, where you're looking. You don't want to change this when you walk in. Another thing is your breathing. Because while your heart rate might be out of control, your breathing can come into your control. And you can take a few deep breaths. Depending on the piece, depending on the direction of your bow, you can deliberately inhale or exhale, at the beginning of the piece. So if you begin really softly with a long bow, then maybe you would want to do it on an exhale. Breathe out. Because these are things you can control. And while they're a little bit outside of your playing, they're completely in your control. And they really, really help maintain this sort of same environment mentally as when you were practicing, so that hopefully the nerves are relieved and things come across a lot better. Now, I've just got to check that this is still recording right now. Okay, we're good. I've got PTSD from the last time because I recorded this yesterday actually, and my phone ran out of storage, and so I was just talking to myself for like 20 minutes. Yeah. The next thing is to practice the actual event. And so by practicing the actual event, I mean, don't shoot yourself in the foot by coming unprepared. If you know you're going to have to walk in and you're going to have to play everything, front to back, from the start to the end, with no gaps, you're not going to be able to stop. You're not going to be able to stop and turn pages. You're not going to be able to stop and, take a random snack break or something. Then give yourself the chance to prepare for that. Put yourself in that environment. Force yourself to sit down, or not sit down, to stand up, play everything you need to play like it was the audition. Do a run through like it was the audition. This is also when you notice different things about how you play, because we do funny things when it gets to the actual audition setting. You might just do things that are a bit different and a bit weird, and you're not sort of used to how you play when you have to play everything through the entire way. And so get used to that. Get used to playing everything through the entire way, whatever excerpt, whatever concerto, whatever etudes, caprices you need to play play them in the order you'll play them all the way through, preferably with someone watching, and if not, recorded, right? Because then you're just prepared. There's no reason to practice all these little bits, all these little fine details out of context and never give yourself a chance to get used to putting everything in a row in context. And so just practice that a few times. Run through everything, start to finish, hopefully with someone else in the room, so you can get an idea of what it's actually going to be like when you're in the audition. And the last thing I have is get closer to the music. So what I mean by this sounds weird, a weird one, but we have to think of how far removed an audition is from what we actually are trying to do. So when you play an audition, imagine an audition excerpt. You play one section of the orchestra's part of one movement of one piece without anybody conducting and without anybody watching. When you think of it like that, like it's so many times removed from what you're actually doing, which is playing music with people and for other people, making music. And so if you just try as much as you can to get a little closer to what it will actually be like, to get a little closer to thinking back to the music, because this ties into the long-term thinking at the start, that we don't do this just for the audition's sake. We do this for the music, really. And so if you can try to get as close as you can to that music, that'd be very helpful. So just to recap everything, thinking long-term, going into the audition, this is just one of many auditions you'll probably do, many auditions that people have done, many auditions that the panel will see. It's just another audition. It's just part of this longer term. Then compromise and prioritize, right? In your practice, you have to make compromises. Say, okay, I'm not going to play this as fast as I really want it to go. As fast as I know, I love it when this violinist plays it this fast. I'm not going to play it that fast. I know I want it that fast. I have to make some compromises. Okay. Then prioritize. What's the worst? What are the points, the low points in each piece that could lead to disaster, basically? Then practice the actual event. Put yourself in the environment as close as you can to actually showing up and playing that audition. Then the next is get closer to the music. So get as close as you can to feeling like you're playing music with other people, for other people, just enjoying it, because this is why we do it. And the last, thinking of things outside of your playing. So that's, where your weight is in your feet, how you're breathing, where you're looking, how you hold the violin, these sorts of things. And so hopefully one of those, I really hope that someone watching this, one of those is the thing that sort of gets you over the edge of that audition nervousness or stress and helps you perform that little bit better. Because it really is usually the things that we learn that help us more than just our practicing. Because how many auditions would it take? Realistically, how many auditions would it take someone to do on their own without any other information for them to figure all of this out? Probably quite a few auditions. And so if you can instead just watch a video like this or from someone else and find those bits of information before it's too late, before you've already done the audition, and then you find out, oh, I should have prioritized the practice. Oh, I breathed, I wasn't breathing properly. That's why I played so. If you can find these things out before you have to play the audition, hopefully, fingers crossed, things will go a lot better for you. If you're watching this video anytime, basically more than a week or so after it's been uploaded, there should be something good in the school community. If you're watching before then, just check out the link, check out what we're building, what's going to be there. Don't buy or anything yet, probably. If you're later than that, then definitely check it out because there'll be something good in there. If you have an audition, I really, really hope it goes well. I hope for everyone watching that the auditions that you do go as best as you could. And I'll see you in the next video.